The funeral home was packed, yet it felt like I was standing alone. The scent of lilies mixed with polished mahogany filled the air, an overwhelming reminder of the grief pressing heavily on my chest. My father lay in his casket at the front of the room, a man who had built his life from nothing, a man who raised me to stand tall, yet I stood there struggling to breathe. The weight of his absence was unbearable. I swallowed the lump in my throat, blinking rapidly, willing the tears not to fall. I had to be strong. For him, for my family, for myself. But then, a whisper, soft, sharp, and cruel, slithered into my ear. "You're a disgrace." Crying like a child in front of everyone, I stiffened. My wife, Lena, leaned in ever so slightly, her lips barely moving as she delivered those venomous words. Her tone was low, but the malice behind it was unmistakable. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to turn to her, to ask her what kind of monster she was to say something like that in a moment like this. But I didn't. I let the words hang between us, sharp as knives, slicing away whatever illusion of love we once had. Instead, I focused on the eulogies being given. My brother, David, stood at the podium, sharing stories of our father, his strength, his sacrifices, his unshakable integrity. The man had built everything from the ground up, instilling in us the values of hard work and loyalty. He was respected, admired, loved. I clenched my jaw. If only he had seen what I was seeing now. Lena barely bothered to pretend to grieve. She sat beside me, her posture perfect, her expression carefully crafted into something that mimicked sadness. But I knew better. She never cared for my father. She had tolerated him, at best. To her, his death wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. Money. That was all she saw. I caught the flicker of impatience in her gaze as she checked her watch. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. My father wasn't even in the ground yet, and she was already wondering how long this would take. David returned to his seat, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. A silent offer of support. I nodded, appreciating the gesture, though my mind was elsewhere. Then, just as the final words were spoken, the sound of approaching footsteps made my heart pound. Mr. Finch, my father's lawyer, stood before me, his face unreadable. "It's time for the reading of the will," he said. I felt Lena's posture shift beside me. Her back straightened, her shoulders squared, and then I saw it, the flicker of hunger in her eyes, the glimmer of greed. Finally, something she cared about. She reached for my arm, her touch feather-light but firm, as if anchoring herself to what she believed was rightfully hers. I said nothing, though the air between us was thick with the weight of unspoken words. As we followed the lawyer toward my father's study, my heart pounded, not with grief, but with something colder, a whisper of something I couldn't quite name, an unease curling around my ribs. Something told me this was the moment everything would change. And I was right. The walk to my father's study felt heavier than it should have. My shoes sank into the plush carpet, each step echoing inside my chest. I could feel Lena's grip tightening on my arm, not out of affection, not for comfort, but out of control. A silent claim, a stake in the outcome of what was about to happen. The study was exactly how my father had left it. Walls lined with rich mahogany bookshelves, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled of old wisdom and power. His large desk stood as the centerpiece, polished to a shine, his presence still lingering despite his absence. The scent of his favorite cigar still clung to the air, mixing with the weight of history embedded in this room. Family members settled into their seats, a murmur of grief lingering between them. My mother sat to the side, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face a mask of quiet sorrow. David, my younger brother, positioned himself beside me, his eyes flickering between the lawyer and Lena, already sensing the storm about to break. And then there was her, Lena. She had slipped into her usual persona, calm, confident, expectant. If grief had ever touched her, it had been fleeting. Her back was straight, her lips pressed together in a thin line of restrained patience. She wasn't mourning a loss. She was anticipating a gain. I knew that expression. I had seen it before, whenever she talked about expensive vacations, luxurious handbags, and designer shoes. The hunger for more. Mr. Finch, my father's longtime attorney, cleared his throat as he pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. His expression remained unreadable as he placed it on the desk and unfolded a crisp sheet of paper. Reed's final wishes are as follows, he began, his voice steady, filling the study with authority. The room hushed. My mother exhaled sharply, bracing herself. He started listing assets, real estate, stocks, investments, savings accounts. Every sentence felt like a page turning in my father's legacy. Lena barely blinked. She was waiting for the part that concerned her. And then, it happened. Mr. Finch adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat before continuing. To my son, Michael, I leave everything, every dollar, every asset, every property. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The air shifted, thick with disbelief. My hands tightened in my lap as the weight of those words settled over me. My breath caught in my throat. Everything. I glanced at David, who gave me a small nod of approval, but his eyes were locked on Lena. That's when I felt it, her nails digging into my forearm. Her reaction was immediate, visceral. Her body went rigid beside me, the confidence she carried just moments ago cracking like fragile glass. Wait. Lena's voice wavered, barely above a whisper, before sharpening into something more forceful. What? I turned to look at her fully now, watching as the realization dawned in her widened eyes. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap. I could practically hear her thoughts racing, calculating, searching for an explanation. Mr. Finch barely acknowledged her, his professionalism unshaken. He simply continued. David's share was secure. My mother's share was protected. But Lena's name never appeared. Not once. She blinked, as if trying to process the reality of it, as if trying to force the words to change. This must be a mistake, she whispered, her voice hollow. David, who had been watching with barely concealed amusement, finally spoke. No mistake. Dad knew exactly what he was doing. Lena shot up from her seat, her composure slipping like sand through her fingers. No, no, no. That doesn't make sense. Her breath hitched, and she turned to me, her expression demanding an answer. Michael, say something. Her voice cracked. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't flinch, because for the first time in my life, I saw her, really saw her. This wasn't a grieving wife. This wasn't a woman who had lost her father-in-law. This was a gambler who just realized she had bet everything and lost. And she was unraveling before my eyes. You know how much I did for him, she continued, her voice rising, now frantic. I was his daughter-in-law. You tolerated him. I interrupted, my voice even, controlled. You never respected him, and he saw that. Her lips parted, as if she was about to argue, but nothing came out, because she knew it was true. My father had seen through her from the beginning. He had never been fooled by her carefully crafted persona, the polite smiles, the feigned kindness. And now, even in death, he had the final say. Lena turned back to Mr. Finch, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This isn't fair. He must have meant to include me. Mr. Finch, unbothered by her panic, simply set the papers down. Reed's will was clear. Every decision was intentional. Your husband receives everything. The weight of those words pressed down on her, suffocating. I saw it. The moment she realized there was no escape. The woman who had whispered cruel words at my father's funeral, who had mocked my grief, who had thought she was untouchable, was now begging for a reality that didn't exist. Her breath hitched as she turned to me, her eyes desperate now. Her nails dug into my arm, her grip bruising. Michael, please, do something. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt nothing. No love, no sympathy, no anger, just clarity. I removed her hand from my arm, gently, deliberately. There's nothing to do, Lena. Her face crumpled, her body trembling as if reality itself had turned against her. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about the money. This was about something deeper, something she didn't want me to know. I turned to Mr. Finch. There's nothing else, right? He hesitated. Then he reached into his briefcase. Actually, there is. He pulled out another envelope, one marked confidential. And Lena? She went white. Lena's reaction was instant. The moment Mr. Finch pulled out that second envelope, I felt her entire body tense beside me. Her breathing hitched, and when I turned my head slightly, I saw it. The unmistakable flash of panic in her eyes. Not anger. Not frustration. Fear. She knew what was in that envelope, and she did not want it read. No, Lena blurted out, her voice too sharp, too fast. This isn't necessary. Reed made his wishes clear. Her words fell flat in the room. Everyone heard the desperation in them. Everyone saw how her hands curled into the fabric of her dress, twisting it in her lap. David, sitting beside me, let out a quiet chuckle. He was enjoying this. I wasn't. I was too busy putting the pieces together. Why was she panicking? Why was she more afraid of this letter than she was of losing the money? I didn't speak. I just waited, my gaze locked on Mr. Finch. He, too, noticed Lena's reaction. His expression was unreadable, professional as ever, but he adjusted his glasses slightly, a small tell that he was preparing for impact. He cleared his throat. Michael, this letter was left specifically for you. Reed suspected there might be complications. Complications? My pulse quickened. What did my father know? Lena tried again, her voice tighter. Michael, don't do this. Whatever's in there, it doesn't matter. I turned to her, finally meeting her gaze. Then why are you scared? She blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Mr. Finch ignored her entirely. He slid the envelope across the desk toward me. My name was written on it in my father's unmistakable handwriting. I hesitated. Then I picked it up and broke the seal. The moment I pulled out the letter, a folded sheet of paper slid free. But that wasn't all. A key. A small, silver key, attached to a tag. I unfolded the letter. My father's words, written in smooth, deliberate strokes, filled the page. Michael, my son, if you're reading this, it means I was right. Your wife doesn't love you. She never did. She's been using you, and I have the proof. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but I refuse to leave this earth without making sure you see the truth. Go to my desk, the bottom left drawer. The key I left for you will open it. Inside, you'll find everything. I stopped reading. My chest felt like it had caved in. Lena's voice came in sharp. Michael, whatever's in there, it's a lie. A lie. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I stood, moving toward my father's massive wooden desk. Each step felt heavier than the last. Lena moved suddenly as if she was going to stop me, but David was faster. He grabbed her wrist. I wouldn't, he warned. His voice was low, controlled, but the threat in it was clear. Lena froze. I reached the desk. I fit the key into the lock of the bottom left drawer, and I turned it. Click. The drawer slid open with ease. Inside was a black folder. Thick. Heavy. I pulled it out and flipped it open, and then my heart stopped. Photos. Bank statements. Copies of hotel receipts in different cities. Messages. I flipped through them with numb fingers. Lena had been cheating on me for over a year. Everything inside this folder told a story. A story of stolen moments, of expensive trips I never knew about, of nights spent with someone else while I thought she was home. I stared at the pictures of her and another man, laughing, holding hands, kissing. Everything in me went cold. Behind me, Lena finally broke. I can explain, she whispered, her voice shaking. I turned to her, slowly. She was pale. More than pale. She looked sick, but I wasn't feeling merciful. I lifted the photos, one by one. Explain this. She blinked rapidly, her lips trembling. Michael, I slammed the folder onto the desk. Who is he? Her breath hitched. She looked at David, at Mr. Finch, at my mother, who was covering her mouth in horror. She looked at everyone but me. And then, from the corner of the room, David let out a low chuckle. Go ahead, Lena, he said. Tell him who Ethan is. My stomach dropped. Lena's entire body jolted. How do you know that name? David shrugged, looking far too amused. Because I've been tracking him. And you. She whipped toward him, fury and fear flashing in her eyes. You had me followed? David smirked. Nah, you just weren't as careful as you thought. Lena turned back to me, grabbing my hands, pleading. Michael, I made a mistake. I was confused. I love you, I swear. I pulled away like she had burned me. I had no words, no thoughts, nothing but rage and clarity. For months, I had felt something was wrong. For months, I had dismissed it, convinced myself it was just stress. I had trusted her, and she had made a fool out of me. Lena collapsed onto her knees. Please, Michael, we can fix this. Don't let this ruin us. David leaned in, his tone mocking. Looks like it already did. I stared down at my wife, the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, the woman who had mocked my grief while hiding this. And then, for the first time in our marriage, I felt nothing but disgust. This wasn't a betrayal. Lena's voice trembled, her hands clasped together as if praying for mercy. Her whole body sagged in defeat, a sharp contrast to the arrogant woman who had whispered mockery in my ear just hours ago. Michael, please listen to me. I held up a hand. Don't. I couldn't stomach the sound of her voice. Not after what I had just seen. Not after staring at those photos, those receipts. Concrete proof that while I had been faithfully devoted to our marriage, she had been spending my time, my money, my trust on someone else. Ethan. The name burned in my throat. I clenched my jaw so hard I could hear my teeth grind. David sat back in his chair, arms crossed, watching her unravel with the same amusement as someone watching a predictable ending to a bad movie. Should we give her a chance to explain? David drawled, though his tone made it clear he wasn't interested in hearing whatever lies she was about to spin. Lena's head whipped toward him, her face twisted in desperation. Shut up, David. He smirked. Now there's the real Lena. Thought you'd keep up that little innocent act a bit longer. Her hands shook as she turned back to me. Michael, you have to believe me. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. You didn't mean to cheat on me? I asked, tilting my head. It just happened? She nodded quickly, as if relief flooded through her at my words. As if I was about to be fooled. Yes, it was a mistake. A terrible, horrible mistake. I love you, Michael, I swear. Stop. She flinched at the iciness in my tone. Don't insult me with I love yous, and I made a mistake. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. You had a whole affair, Lena. You didn't trip and fall into another man's bed. Tears welled up in her eyes. I was confused. David let out a low whistle. Damn. I hope you got a better excuse than that. Mr. Finch cleared his throat, professional as ever, though there was a flicker of interest in his usually impassive eyes. Lena's voice cracked. Michael, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I pulled the black folder closer to me and flipped through its contents. My hands didn't shake anymore. The rage had settled into something calmer, something more lethal. Bank transactions. Flights booked under false names. Expensive hotel stays in the very cities I had traveled to for work. The affair had been planned down to the last detail. This wasn't a mistake. This was a series of calculated betrayals. And my father had known. He had seen through her before I ever did. He had anticipated this moment, and he had ensured she would leave with nothing. Poetic justice. Lena must have seen something change in my eyes because her desperation intensified. She suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my hands. Michael, please. You're my husband. We can fix this. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. Don't. My voice was so cold, so final, that she actually froze mid-sentence. The silence in the room stretched long and suffocating. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Who is he? A beat of hesitation. A flicker of something unreadable in her expression. Then, a whisper. What? I held up one of the photos, letting it hover between us. Who is he? Her lip trembled. Michael, his name is Ethan, David answered for her. Right, Lena? Lena whipped her head toward him so fast I almost expected her neck to snap. Her eyes were wild now. How the hell do you know that? She hissed. David smirked. Because I looked into it. Lena's breathing turned ragged. Yeah. I had my suspicions. You weren't as careful as you thought. I turned my full attention to her. Every fiber of my being was vibrating with restrained fury, but my voice remained calm, controlled. Who is he to you? She swallowed hard. I leaned in. Your lover? Your escape plan? A fool you strung along, just like me? Tears slipped down her cheeks, but for the first time, I saw them for what they were. Tears of fear. Tears of a woman who knew she had lost everything. I straightened. How long? She choked on a sob. Michael, please. How long? Her lip quivered. Over a year. A slow exhale left my lungs. I had been married to a stranger, sleeping beside a liar. I let the words settle. Let the weight of them crush whatever remnants of love had been left. Then, I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a crisp white envelope. Lena frowned. What is that? I slid it across the desk. Divorce papers, I said, my voice void of emotion. Already signed. Lena's breath hitched. What? I've been waiting for this moment, I said simply. Her mouth opened, then closed. Shock froze her in place. Then, finally, it sank in. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope, her nails scratching against the paper as she frantically pulled the documents out. Her voice cracked. Michael, no. No, please, we can talk about this. Mr. Finch cleared his throat. Per Reed's final instructions, should Michael file for divorce, Lena receives nothing. The room fell silent. Lena's entire body jerked. Nothing, she whispered. Mr. Finch nodded. No alimony. No assets. No money. Lena gasped, her breath coming in short, frantic bursts. You can't do this. This is illegal. I'll fight it. David chuckled. Good luck with that. Lena turned to me, eyes blazing with fury and terror. Michael, don't do this to me. I met her gaze, the last piece of my heart turning to stone. You did this to yourself. Lena's breathing turned shallow, her chest rising and falling in quick, panicked gasps. She gripped the divorce papers in her trembling hands, her knuckles white. Michael, please, this isn't real. You don't mean this. I exhaled slowly, my fingers pressing against the dark wood of my father's desk. Lena, I said, my voice disturbingly calm. You had an affair for over a year. You lied to my face. You spent my money on another man. And now, you think I don't mean it? She took a shaky step toward me, the scent of her perfume. One I once adored, now making my stomach churn. I was confused, she whispered. I made a mistake. A mistake. That word again. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. David scoffed from his seat. A mistake? I don't know, Lena. Booking hotel rooms under fake names seems pretty deliberate to me. Lena spun around, her eyes flashing with fury. Stay out of this, David. He leaned back with an amused smirk. Oh, trust me. I'm loving every second of this train wreck. She turned back to me, swallowing hard. Michael, we can fix this. I love you. I let out a slow, humorless chuckle. Love? I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. You love me? She nodded quickly, hope lighting up her eyes for a fraction of a second. Then I picked up the black folder from my father's desk and flipped it open. I pulled out a printed conversation, a text exchange. Her words. Lena, Michael is clueless. I could empty our accounts, and he wouldn't even notice. Ethan, damn, babe. So when are you leaving him? Lena, I just need him for a little longer. Once I get access to the inheritance, I'll be gone. Silence. The air shifted. Lena's face drained of color. The entire room was suffocating, the weight of the truth pressing against every inch of my skin. I lifted my gaze to meet hers. This is your idea of love? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had nothing. Nothing but shame and regret. I let the paper drop onto the desk, the sound of it hitting the wood like a final nail in the coffin. Lena let out a choked sob, her hands reaching for mine, her grip desperate. Michael, please. I was angry when I said that. I didn't mean it. You have to believe me. I believed her once. That was my mistake. I pulled my hand away. No, Lena. My voice was firm. Final. You don't get to ask for my trust anymore. Her breath hitched. I saw it in her eyes. The moment realization struck. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to give her another chance. She had lost. And she knew it. Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees in front of me. Please, she sobbed. Please don't do this. I stood over her, watching as the woman I once loved, the woman who had mocked my grief, who had whispered cruel words in my ear, who had betrayed me in every way possible, broke apart at my feet. And I felt nothing. No anger. No pain. Just freedom. David let out a low whistle. Damn. I didn't think she'd actually beg. Lena snapped her head toward him, her face blotchy and red. Shut up, she screamed. You've always hated me. You wanted this to happen. David smirked. Oh, absolutely. Lena turned back to me, her breath uneven, her body shaking. Michael, she whispered, her voice softer now. You don't have to forgive me. Just don't throw me away like this. I stared down at her, my expression unreadable. Then I bent down, just enough for my lips to brush against her ear. You threw yourself away, Lena. She shuddered. And with that, I turned around and walked toward the door. She scrambled to her feet, panic twisting her features. Michael, where are you going? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I opened the door and stepped out of the study, the weight of years of lies finally lifting from my shoulders. David followed, his footsteps light with satisfaction. So, I'm thinking celebratory drinks? I exhaled, my first real breath in what felt like years. Sounds good. Behind us, Lena's sobs turned to screams. But I didn't turn back. Not this time. Not ever again. I stood outside the study, staring at the intricate patterns on the hallway rug, trying to absorb what had just happened. The past hour had unraveled my entire marriage, torn apart the fabric of trust one had once foolishly wrapped around Lena. I had gone into my father's funeral thinking I had lost only him, but now I realized I had also lost a wife, or rather, the illusion of one. David leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, his smirk unwavering. You know, I always knew she was trouble, he said, shaking his head. But wow, even I didn't expect her to beg like that. I said nothing, my fingers tightening into fists. Michael, my mother's voice came from behind me. I turned to see her standing at the entrance of the study, her expression filled with sorrow, not just for my father, but for the mess that had unfolded. Come with me, son, she said softly. I followed her down the hallway, leaving Lena's muffled cries behind. She led me to the living room, where sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden streaks on the polished floor. The house felt too big, too empty without my father. She gestured for me to sit, and I did, my entire body feeling heavier than it ever had. You don't have to say anything, she said, lowering herself onto the couch beside me, but I want you to listen. I met her eyes and I saw it, the quiet strength that my father had always admired in her. I know you're hurt, she said, voice steady. I know you're angry, but I need you to understand something. I waited. This isn't the end of you, Michael. I let out a slow breath. It feels like it. She reached out, taking my hand. I watched your father build everything from the ground up. I watched him fight, struggle, fall, and stand back up again. And I see him in you. I swallowed hard. He saw it before I did, I admitted. He knew what she was. And she squeezed my hand. Don't blame yourself for trusting her. That's on her, not you. I nodded, silent. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure what came next. I had spent so much time believing in my marriage, in the idea that Lena and I were partners. Now that the illusion had shattered, I wasn't sure what to do with the pieces. But then, as if fate wasn't done with me yet, my phone vibrated. I frowned, pulling it from my pocket. A text. From Lena. Lena, Michael, we need to talk. Please. I can't lose you. Call me. My jaw clenched. David, who had been leaning against the doorway, raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. She's already trying to pull you back in. I exhaled sharply. Of course she was. I turned the screen toward them, showing the message. My mother shook her head. She won't stop, Michael. Not until you make her. I already knew that. I already knew Lena was the type who couldn't stand losing. The money, the security, the social status. She had built her entire life around being the wife of Michael Carter, and now that foundation had cracked beneath her feet. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She was crying because she lost her safety net. David smirked. Want me to reply for you? I can think of a few choice words. I let out a short laugh, but it was empty. No, I muttered. She's not worth another second of my time. And with that, I deleted the message. The finality of it felt strange, not freeing, not satisfying, just necessary. I stood, stretching my stiff limbs. I need to get out of here, I said. Clear my head. David pushed off the doorway. Drinks. I shook my head. Not yet. I needed something different, something real. I ended up at my father's favorite diner, the kind of place that had been around for decades, where the waitresses knew his order before he even sat down. I slid into a booth, my hands resting on the worn wooden table. A waitress approached, smiling warmly. Hey there, sweetheart. Haven't seen you here in a while. I forced a smile. Yeah, it's been a rough few days. She nodded knowingly, placing a menu in front of me. I heard about your dad. He was a good man. I swallowed hard. Yeah, he was. She patted my shoulder. I'll get you a coffee. I let out a breath, leaning back against the seat. This was it. A new chapter. A new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to turn the page. Lena didn't take silence well. By the time I got home later that evening, my phone had 12 missed calls and an onslaught of desperate messages from her, each one more frantic than the last. Lena, Michael, please pick up. We need to talk. I can't sleep like this. Lena, I made a mistake, okay? I was stupid, but you can't just walk away from everything we built. Lena, you're my husband. This isn't how this ends. Please, just let me explain. Lena, you're making a mistake, Michael. Don't let David or your father's stupid will ruin us. I stared at my phone, my jaw tightening as I read through them. There it was. The shift. The pleading was over. The guilt tripping had started. This wasn't about us. Not really. This was about control. Lena had spent years manipulating situations to her benefit, but she had always been subtle, careful. Now, she was unraveling. I tossed the phone onto the couch and sat down, running my hands over my face. David walked in from the kitchen, beer in hand. Let me guess, Lena still isn't taking the L? I scoffed. She never learned how. He plopped down onto the opposite couch, smirking. You know she's gonna show up, right? I sighed. I know. And I was right. Because 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, staring at the door, feeling the weight of everything settle over me. David stood. Want me to handle it? I shook my head. No, I need to do this. I crossed the room and opened the door. Lena stood on the porch, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. She had wrapped herself in a coat, but I could tell she had rushed here in a panic, probably the moment I didn't respond. Her lips trembled. Michael, I exhaled through my nose. Lena, go home. She shook her head violently, stepping forward. No, we can't just leave things like this. We're married. We can fix this. I stood firm. There's nothing to fix. Her hands flew to her chest, fingers grasping at the fabric like she was holding herself together. You're throwing away everything over one mistake? I clenched my jaw. A year of lying is not a mistake, Lena. She sucked in a shaky breath, fresh tears filling her eyes. I love you. I felt nothing. I let the silence stretch between us. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Michael, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you, but I never stopped loving you. I laughed. A low, bitter sound. That's funny, I said, my tone sharp. Because I don't think you ever started. Her breath hitched. That's not true. I crossed my arms, my expression hardening. If you ever really loved me, you wouldn't have used me. You wouldn't have spent my money on another man. You wouldn't have mocked me while you were sneaking around behind my back." Her shoulders shook. She dropped her head, staring at the ground like it held answers. "I was scared," she whispered. I frowned. "Scared?" She swallowed. "I knew I wasn't enough for you." I blinked. That was new. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Your father never thought I was good enough. David never liked me. I always felt like I was waiting for you to wake up one day and realize I didn't belong in your world." I studied her, but I said nothing. She sniffled. "Ethan, he made me feel wanted." I let out a slow breath. "So you repaid my loyalty by betraying me?" She flinched. I shook my head. "I don't feel sorry for you, Lena. You had choices. You made yours." She wiped her eyes aggressively, frustration bubbling beneath her grief. "I don't know how to be without you, Michael." I leaned in slightly. "That's not love. That's dependency." She froze. And in that moment, I saw it. The truth. She didn't love me. She loved the life I gave her. She loved the security, the luxury, the stability. She loved being Michael Carter's wife. But me? The actual person? I was just a placeholder in the life she built for herself. And now that life was crumbling. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. When she lifted her gaze again, her expression had shifted. She looked cold. "Fine," she whispered. "If this is what you want, then so be it." I tilted my head. "Are we finally done?" Her lips pressed together. "You'll regret this." David let out a sharp laugh from behind me. "Oh, now we're doing threats? Love that for you, Lena." She shot him a glare before turning back to me. "You think you're winning right now, but you're not." I smiled. "Oh, but I am." Her jaw clenched, her nails digging into her palms. "Goodbye, Michael." I nodded. "Goodbye, Lena." She hesitated for half a second, like she was waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. I stepped back and shut the door in her face. David let out a low whistle. "Damn, that was brutal." I exhaled, rolling my shoulders. It was necessary. I turned and walked back into the house, my pulse finally slowing, my mind feeling clearer than it had in years. David clapped a hand on my back. "So, now that your insufferable wife is finally out of your life, what's next?" I let out a slow breath, thinking about the future. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know. And that was okay, because the best revenge was living better without her. I sat in the dimly lit living room long after Lena left, the silence pressing against me like an unfamiliar weight. The house felt different now, lighter, emptier, but in a way that wasn't sad, just free. David had gone to bed an hour ago, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table, the weight of them heavier than the ink scrawled across the pages. I leaned back, rubbing a hand over my face. It was finally sinking in. She was gone. I had spent years believing in something that never existed. Years thinking Lena and I had built something real, something worth fighting for. But it was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion. And now it was over. I should have felt something, anger, regret, relief. But all I felt was exhausted. The sound of my phone buzzing on the table broke the quiet. I glanced at the screen. Lena. Another message. I exhaled sharply, already knowing what it would say before I even opened it. "Lena, you're making a mistake. I hope you realize that before it's too late." I stared at the words, a humorless smile tugging at my lips. Even now, she couldn't admit she had lost. Even now, she still thought she had control over how this ended. I placed my phone face down on the table and pushed myself off the couch. I wasn't playing her games anymore. The next morning, I found myself standing outside my father's old office, the place where he had built his company from the ground up, where he had spent decades ensuring our family had a future. I hesitated before stepping inside, the scent of old wood and cigar smoke hitting me instantly. It was strange being here without him. "Michael." I turned to see Mr. Finch standing near the bookshelves, his posture straight as always, his suit crisp and perfect. He had been my father's lawyer for years, a man who knew how to handle business with ruthless precision. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, shaking his hand. He nodded. "I assume this is about finalizing the divorce?" I exhaled. Yeah. We both sat down, the desk between us. Finch folded his hands. I won't lie to you, Michael. Lena is going to fight this. I scoffed. Of course she will. She won't win, he continued. Your father made sure of that. His will was ironclad. Lena has no claim to your inheritance, no alimony, no assets. Legally, she walks away with nothing. I nodded. Good. Finch studied me for a moment. But that doesn't mean she'll go quietly. She might try to manipulate you, make you doubt yourself. I met his gaze, steady, unshaken. She doesn't have that power over me anymore. He nodded approvingly. Then let's move forward. A few days passed. Lena's messages became less frequent, more erratic. One day, she was begging me to reconsider. The next, she was furious, accusing me of ruining her life. Then, she'd fall silent again, only to try a new approach. I ignored all of it, but what I didn't expect was the knock on my door late one evening. I knew who it was before I even opened it. I sighed, running a hand through my hair before pulling the door open. Lena stood there, wrapped in a coat, her face drawn and pale. She looked different, smaller, like reality had finally settled on her shoulders. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, eyes glassy. I leaned against the doorway. Lena. She swallowed. Can I come in? I hesitated. Every part of me screamed no, but a strange curiosity kept me still. I stepped aside, allowing her in. She walked past me, her steps slow, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she belonged here anymore. She didn't. I closed the door and turned to face her. What do you want, Lena? She exhaled shakily. I don't know. I crossed my arms. That's not an answer. Her fingers clenched at the hem of her coat. I don't know what to do. I waited, watching her carefully. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Do you even care? Or do you just hate me now? I considered that for a moment. Hate? No, I didn't hate her. That would require caring. And I was done caring. I don't feel anything for you anymore, Lena, I said simply. Not love, not hate, just nothing. She flinched, as if those words cut deeper than anything else I could have said. She wiped at her eyes. I didn't think you'd let me go so easily. I tilted my head. That's the problem, isn't it? You thought I'd always be here. No matter what you did. No matter how much you lied. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded slowly. I did. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. I guess this is really over then. I nodded. It was over the moment you betrayed me. She swallowed hard, then turned toward the door. She hesitated with her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I did love you. In my own way. I didn't respond. Because her way was never love. It was selfishness. It was greed. It was manipulation. She waited for me to say something. Anything. I didn't. Finally, with a quiet, resigned sigh, she opened the door and stepped out into the night. And this time, I didn't watch her go. I closed the door, locking it behind her. And when I turned around, I realized something. For the first time in a long, long time, I was truly free. The silence in my house was different now. Before, it had been suffocating. Thick with tension, with suspicion, with the slow erosion of a marriage I didn't realize was already dead. But now, it was peaceful. It had been 2 weeks since Lena walked out that door, and in that time, I had begun rediscovering what life felt like without the weight of her deceit pressing down on me. I woke up without the tightness in my chest. I ate meals without forced small talk or the underlying fear that whatever I said would be twisted later. I didn't check my phone, dreading what manipulation she would throw at me next. I was free. And yet, there was one thing I still needed to do. David and I pulled into the cemetery parking lot just before noon. The sky was clear, the air crisp. A good day for a visit. I grabbed the bouquet of white lilies from the back seat, my father's favorite, and we made our way toward his grave. David walked beside me, his usual easygoing demeanor softened by the setting. You ready for this? I nodded. Yeah. We reached the polished black headstone, the engraved letters standing bold against the sun. Reed Carter, beloved father, leader, and friend. I took a deep breath before crouching down, placing the flowers at the base. I should have listened to you, I murmured. David stood back, giving me space. I let my fingers brush over the cool surface of the stone. You saw her for what she was before I ever did. I wanted to believe she loved me. I wanted to believe I could make it work. But you knew better. The wind rustled through the trees, a quiet whisper through the leaves. I wish you were here to see it, I said. To see that you were right. To see that I finally opened my damn eyes. A small chuckle left my lips. You'd probably say, "Took you long enough, son." David snorted. He definitely would have. I shook my head, smiling. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't bitter. I stood up, patting the headstone lightly, as if my father could feel it. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." We stood there for a few more minutes before turning to leave. As we walked back toward the car, David glanced at me. "So, what's next for you?" I let out a slow breath. "I don't know." And I meant it. For the first time in years, my life wasn't tied to someone else's expectations. There was no marriage to navigate, no lies to unravel, no fights to avoid. It was just me. And that was okay. David smirked. "Well, I vote we celebrate your new bachelor status with an extremely overpriced steak dinner." I chuckled. "You just want an excuse to eat expensive food." "Absolutely." I rolled my eyes but nodded. "Fine. Let's go." And as we drove away from the cemetery, I realized something. I wasn't just free of Lena. I was free to start over. I never realized how much of my life had been wrapped around Lena until she was gone. It wasn't just the obvious things. Her voice in the house, her clothes in the closet, her perfume lingering in the air. It was the subtle things. The way I used to second-guess myself before speaking. The way I'd hesitate before checking the bank account, knowing there was always a charge I hadn't approved. The way I'd wake up feeling like I was already losing, even before the day started. Now there was nothing but space. And for the first time in years, it felt like mine. 2 months after Lena walked out of my life, I sat in my father's old study, staring at the framed photo of him on the desk. He looked just as he had in life. Strong, steady, unshakable. I leaned back in his leather chair, exhaling slowly. This was mine now. His company. His legacy. His empire. And I was going to make it something more. I opened my laptop and pulled up the financial reports. My father had built his wealth through business, but I knew where his real passion had always been, helping people. I still remembered the nights he'd sit at the dinner table, talking about how much he wished he could do more, how success didn't mean anything if it wasn't shared. I tapped my fingers against the desk. It was time to do what he never got the chance to finish. I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Finch's number. "Michael," he greeted. "To what do I owe the call?" "I want to make some changes," I said. "To the company. To my father's estate. I want to start a foundation." There was a brief pause before he responded. "A foundation?" "Yeah," I said. "Something real. Something that helps people who actually need it. Not just investments, not just growing the Carter name, but something that makes a difference." Finch was silent for a moment, then he let out a small chuckle. "Your father would be proud." I swallowed past the tightness in my throat. "Yeah, I think he would." A week later, I sat across from David at one of the nicest restaurants in the city. To celebrate. Not for surviving my divorce. Not for getting out of a bad marriage. But for starting over. David raised his glass, grinning. To Michael Carter. Newly single, emotionally stable, and about to become the city's most eligible bachelor. I laughed, shaking my head. "That's not the goal, David." He smirked. "No? Then what is?" I took a sip of my drink before answering. "I just want to live life on my terms." David nodded, a rare moment of seriousness in his expression. "You deserve that." I exhaled slowly, letting the words settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I believed it. But of course, the past has a funny way of trying to creep back in. The next morning, my phone rang. I almost didn't pick it up, but then I saw the name. Lena. I hesitated for half a second before answering. "What?" She was quiet for a beat, then let out a slow breath. "Michael." Her voice was softer than I remembered. Not cruel, not demanding, just small. I said nothing. She exhaled again. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I leaned back against the counter, expression unreadable. For what? For everything, she admitted. For hurting you. For taking you for granted. For using you. I tilted my head, waiting. I didn't think you'd move on so fast, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled. That's the thing, Lena. I didn't move on fast. I just stopped holding on. Silence. Then, are you happy? I thought about that for a moment, and then, without hesitation, I answered. Yeah, I really am. Another pause. Then a quiet, I'm glad. I didn't ask how she was doing. I didn't need to. She wasn't my problem anymore. She never would be again. Goodbye, Lena. And this time, I meant it. I ended the call, set my phone down, and walked toward the new life waiting for me. The best revenge? Was living better without her. 1 year later, I sat at a cafe downtown, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly as I watched people move past the large windows. The city was alive, pulsing with energy, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just existing in it, I was living. Everything had changed in the past year. The divorce had been finalized. Lena had taken her loss quietly, at least legally. There were no last-minute lawsuits, no desperate attempts to manipulate me back into her orbit. But I had heard things. She had struggled. With no access to the inheritance, no steady flow of money to support her expensive habits, she had fallen hard. The man she had risked everything for, Ethan? He had vanished the moment she lost everything. I would have felt sorry for her. Once. Now she was just a lesson I had survived. I took a sip of my coffee and glanced at my watch. It was time. The Michael Carter Foundation was officially launching today. I left the cafe and made my way to the event hall where the press, donors, and business partners had gathered. As I stepped inside, David greeted me with a clap on the back. "Look at you," he said, grinning, "all dressed up and important looking." I smirked. "That's because I am important." He laughed. "Damn right you are." The room was buzzing with conversation, photographers flashing their cameras as guests mingled. The foundation was my first major move since taking over my father's company, a charity dedicated to helping struggling families, funding scholarships, and providing resources to those who needed it. I had turned the money my father left me into something more than just an empire. I had turned it into a legacy. The event started, and I took my place at the podium. Cameras turned toward me, journalists raising their recorders. I cleared my throat and smiled. My father built a company. I began, my voice steady. He built wealth. He built a future. But most importantly, he built something that lasted beyond him. I glanced at David, at my mother, at the people who had supported me when my world collapsed. I want to do the same, I continued, because at the end of the day, success means nothing if it isn't shared. So today, we start something new, something bigger than one man's fortune. The crowd erupted into applause. I took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. I had one. Not just against Lena. Not just against the betrayal. I had one against the person I used to be. The man who ignored the warning signs. The man who begged for love from someone who never truly gave it. The man who let himself be used because he thought that was what marriage was supposed to be. That man was gone. And in his place was someone stronger. Someone who knew his worth. Someone who had built something real. As the event continued, I stepped to the side for a breath of air. That's when I saw her. Lena. She stood outside, just beyond the glass doors, watching. She looked different. Her once pristine designer wardrobe was gone, replaced by something simpler, more modest. Her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look smaller, more fragile. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the fake, calculating smile I had once known so well. A real one. She gave me a small nod, then turned and disappeared into the crowd outside. I didn't follow. I didn't need to, because the past no longer had any power over me. I turned back to the event, my future waiting for me inside. And this time, I walked forward without looking back. The best revenge? Living a life she could never touch.